memory, is 1,350 feet from the property line. Kevin, do you remember?
I think it's 1 1/10 the turbine height at the maximum reach of the propeller to the property line. But I think it comes to like 1325 to a residence. You know, that's at the right angle.
Yeah, right. Anyway, the General Assembly has modified those. The setback, and these are minimum, okay? These are the minimum setbacks. If you look at one of the other conditions that's in the certificate, it says that they also have to respect the manufacturer's safety manual. Well, the manufacturer's safety manual says nothing can be within 1,600 feet of that turbine to deal with fire risk. So there are the minimum setback that we're talking about, and then there are setbacks that really end up being specific to a particular case to deal with particular types of turbines, the speed of the turbine, and that sort of thing. So the minimum setbacks are being violated. But you can't put the turbine in unless it violates the minimum setback.
Well,
unless you get a waiver.
if the turbine would be, the setback would be to the residence, and I would have 500 feet behind my house, what restriction do I have now with that 500 feet of property that I have that I'm going to be paying taxes on because it's inside the circle?
Well, there's no restriction on your use of your property.
No usage whatsoever, no restriction?
Unless you've signed a lease that allows somebody to use your property in some fashion, or you've assigned mineral rights, or you've done some other, it's your property. You can use it subject to whatever interference there may be from the operation of the wind turbines, whether it's shadow flicker or ice throw or fire or whatever.
So if I would have a building inside that perimeter and I would have damage from the turbine to my building, is it just on me because I'm in the circle?
Well, I don't want to. I'll leave my card.
Important stuff that I want to know.
Yeah. Well, the reality here is that that there may be, depending upon who's at fault for the damage, okay, which is going to be this way the world works. You have to figure out who's at fault for the damage. And if somebody has done something to your property and they caused the damage to occur, the general principles of law are that the person that caused the damage or the business that caused the damage would be responsible for paying you or compensating you for the damages. Now, that's a general principle, but we all know that people fight over who's responsible for paying stuff. So what you would likely have is a controversy that would ultimately be resolved by somebody at some point.
So who's got the deepest pockets is the one that's going to win.
Unfortunately, our system is a lot like that. Yeah.
We got the best government money to buy.
Yeah. Well, I'll leave you my card. Yes, sir.
I was just going to say, since the General Assembly changed the setback to basically the property line only, regardless if they're may or not be a resident.
That's correct.
Is to address the fact that a non-participating property owner shouldn't have to assume the risk, any risk, if he's not under contract or under a waiver or anything. And I think that was the intent, because anywhere in your property, you don't have to assume any kind of risk if you don't want to. And the way it was before, I guess if you stayed in the house, you're supposed to be safe, but other than that, you could be at risk.
At your own risk. Right.
That was the intent of the change, I believe.
And thanks for clarifying. What the General Assembly did was to remove the proximity from the residence. So now there's a minimum setback that runs from the property line. And that's the primary one we were talking about here anyway.
Yeah, I think like in the case of that Nordic N117, it would be like roughly 540 feet to the property line. So if you had, say, you had a woods that was, out of that little zone by 600, why would you want to build a house there later on? Well, limited the use of your property.
Yeah, the other thing that people talk about is it may be perfectly okay to you, but if you want to sell your property, then somebody else may look at the that is negatively affecting what they're willing to pay for your property as well. So those things are being, observed by other folks in other communities that are having similar issues to the ones that are presented here. Any other questions?
Yes.
Yes.
I have a question along the property lines. I know they're going to be taking care of the roads, bringing them back to what they are and that kind of thing. But what about the property values? I mean, those aren't going to be, they are going to be affected, but they're not taking that into account. I talked to the county auditor, and when they built the huge Sunrise building in Clarksfield, he said they automatically went through and lowered the property values of the people in that area. They are probably going to do that here too. When you erect these kinds of things, all the property values in the area are probably going to be lowered too, and then...
Well, there is that concern. Now, what happens in the real world, we'll learn about. But there is that concern. But I want to provide a little context around the law that I referred to earlier that says that the waivers need to be secured from all owners of property adjacent to the wind farm property. The principal author of that language is a gentleman by the name of Senator William Seitz, who's also a non-voting member of the Power Siting Board. And all of you that have been concerned about this wind farm owe him a debt of gratitude for the most part, because he has been very, very outspoken about why that language is in the statute, why that language is in the law. And it was designed to protect non-participating property owners from having damage to their property or having their property devalued because somebody, a few property owners, decided that they wanted to have a wind turbine on their property because it was cash flow. So the protection that is in the law that says waivers need to be secured by all property owners adjoining the wind farm property is designed to try and deal with, in some fashion, the concern that non-participating property owners have about devaluing their property, noise, shadow flicker, all the other things that the Power Siting Board is supposed to have rules on, but doesn't. So, that is another thing that, again, your willingness to sign a waiver may depend upon your perception as to whether or not the wind farm is doing something positive or negative for your community, but also for your individual property. And the outcome of that fight will either give you more control or less control. If they're right about what they need to do to secure the waivers, then it really doesn't help adjoining property owners very much. If we're right, you've got some tools that you can use to protect your interests. And we think you do have the tools. Other questions? Yes, sir.
I hate to make you repeat yourself, but you said the Power Board has to come up with this particular procedure to get these waivers, and they have not done that yet.
That's correct.
Okay, if that's correct, then that means they have to come up with this particular procedure, and then these people will begin the process of getting these waivers. So they have to go through the process, and then they have to get them.
That's correct. The law specifically says that any waiver from the minimum setback must be secured through a procedure that the Power Siting Board has specified by rule. They have not specified that procedure. By the way, they haven't specified it since 2008. That requirement goes back to 2008. And it's not a point of controversy. There is no point. You can look at the Power Siting Board's rules, and you will find no rule dealing with how they're supposed to get a waiver from adjoining property.
No exception.
No exception. No, sir. And I mean, to carry the legal argument, a point further, any waiver that they have claimed to have right now could not have been secured pursuant to a procedure that was specified by the Power Siting Board. Yes, ma'am.
If there was someone that had signed a lease, is this new ruling that they can be bigger and noisier gives them the right to break their lease?
Well, it depends on what your lease says. And unfortunately, a lot of these leases are written in a way so that the wind farm developer can do pretty much anything they want. But it depends upon what your lease says. Yes, sir.
Makes me wonder, if there's plans for more wind farms around. It seems to me that the only things I ever see in the newspapers is us. Nobody's worrying about this anyplace else?
Actually,
You don't read about it.
I do what I do, been doing it a long time. And so there are not very many of me, okay, because they're just, most lawyers don't go into this area. But those of us that do this know each other very well. So there are, as I said, there are people in this room that have been camping out at the General Assembly. There's a great lady in the state, one of the most knowledgeable wind advocates that I've ever run into. Her name is Julie Johnson. She publishes a newsletter, and if you're not a subscriber to that newsletter, but take heart. There are a lot of people around the state that are actively engaged in a similar kind of effort that this community has been engaged in relative to proposed wind farms, and fighting like hell, excuse my language, to make sure that the non-participating property owners' interests are rightly respected, not only by the Power Siting Board, but other local officials. So you're not alone, and even though it's not something that you read about in the newspaper, it is very much a topic of discussion. As I said, the things that Julie and Tom Stacy and other folks in this room have done in Columbus are principally responsible for the increase in the minimum setback requirements. That was the President of the Senate took personal interest in making sure that it got included in the budget. So you are being heard. This business, the business that I'm in, you have to be willing to win on the installment plan. You don't do an individual transaction, it's not like Judge Judy. We're more respectful than she is in most days, but it's not like that. You've got to be willing to consistency of message, consistency of purpose, hanging in there, recognizing the tools that are at your disposal, how you can affect outcomes, maybe hiring people that understand this stuff and have worked in this area for a long time helps. But there are a lot of people that are actively engaged in a similar pursuit. So, and if you want some evidence of that, I'd be happy to give you some email addresses and some of the correspondence that we have late in each evening on this particular subject. All right, and the other thing that's going on is that wind farm development has slowed significantly, largely because most wind farms are highly dependent upon federal subsidy. Principal subsidy is a production tax credit. It's 2.3 cents a kilowatt hour. It's a massive subsidy funded by our wonderful federal government. So right now there's concern about how long that production tax credit might be around. And because it's like cash flow to wind farm developers, if they can't predict what their cash flow is going to be, they can't get a loan. So a lot of the fundamental, and also a lot of the wind farms that were started, smaller wind farms that were started, there's a show on TV called Flip Your House. There's also Flip Your Wind Farm. A lot of the wind farms are being not necessarily pushed from the standpoint of people that actually want to build them, but they want to get the certificate, they want to get the road permit, and they want to get all these other pieces of paper so they can flip it and sell it to somebody that maybe wants to build even taller. So there's a lot of that going on, and whether it's solar or wind or the other renewables right now, projects have slowed because of this production tax credit thing, and also because natural gas prices are so low, it's cheaper to build a natural gas-fired combustion turbine combined cycle most likely, because it's more efficient. That's where people are investing now on the generation side of the business, that and transmission investment. Okay, other questions? I don't want to take the rest of you, we all have Thanksgiving to get to. Thank you very much, and I appreciate the opportunity to be of use. And I've learned a lot, and I always enjoy getting out and meeting real people. Thank you.
Thank you.